What's up my loves, my name is Paige, this is Paige with Paige, and today we're going to be doing my September wrap up. Hello my darlings, so in September I was participating in Pickpongathon and my own readathon, Sufferathon, and I had a wonderful month. So in my blogs I definitely spoke about what things fit for Sufferathon but not so much for Pickpongathon. So I thought I would go over what I actually did read in this video for Pickpongathon as we were going through them. I had so much fun last month and I'm so happy with everything that I did read. We really had such a high rated month and it was a really fun time. I'm gonna talk through our stats and then dive into the books themselves. So in September I read 17 books, which equated to 4,934 pages. This broke down to roughly 164 pages per day, and per book was 290. I was on the smaller side this month. I had one that was under 100 pages. I had 7 between the hundreds page range, 1 in the 200s page range, 3 in the 300s, 3 in the 400s, 1 in the 500s, and 1 in the 600s, which was 699 pages. My average rating was the highest it had been all year with a 4.59. I read 1 contemporary, 1 erotica, 8 fantasy, 5 graphic novels, 1 non-fiction, and 1 thriller. I listened to 2 books solely via audio, read 1 ebook, read 7 books with 0 audiobook, and read 7 physical audiobook combinations. 5 of those physicals were graphic novels and 1 of them was an ARC. I read 5 young adult, 7 new adult, and 5 adult. This would be so interesting to see my stats without having done the Giant Days graphic novels, but I'm not mad at it. I had 1 3.5, 4 5 stars, 1 4.5, and 10 5 stars. Again, 5 of those were Giant Days graphic novels. I read 4 standalones. I started 3 series. 1 is caught up for the remainder of 2023. 8 were continuations of series over 4 series. I didn't catch up on any that I had started prior, but I did finish 2. My biggest book was Ink Death by Cornelia Funk, and that was 699 pages. And my smallest was The Dawn Chorus by Samantha Shannon, which was 92 pages as an ebook. My listening hours was 40.1. And in terms of publication date, I had 1 that was published between 2000 and 2005, 1 between 2006 to 2010, 1 between 2011 and 2015, 12 between 2016 and 2020, 8 of those being from 2020, 1 from 2022, and 1 2023 release. So yeah, it's a very interesting eclectic mix of things that happen throughout the month, and it was really fun having the punishments thrown on top, trying to make it work for my TBR, and that not always being the case. So I did have a few books that I knew that I was going to add on that I don't know if I mentioned in my TBR video because I knew that they were solely for Sufferathon and they didn't end up fitting on my Pickpongathon TBR. Let's dive into the books, talk about where they fit for Pickpongathon if they did, and see how I got on with them. So the first book I read was The Sea Witch by Katie Robert, which is the 5th book in the Wicked Villains series, and this was for the Pickpongathon of On a Friend's wishlist, and 5 stars. Obviously, it's Katie Robert. I love their writing with every fibre of my being, and the dynamic between these characters were just delicious. This was probably one of the weakest Wicked Villains, but I love the way that Katie writes her stories, and I'm going in for a good smutty time, which is exactly what I received. There was a choice made with equipment used and I loved it. I know that not everyone's going to be for that, but I just had a grand old time with it. And so obviously 5 stars. And the characters didn't feel as fleshed out as her previous Wicked Villains, but I still really enjoyed their dynamic and the progression that occurs throughout. Next up, for 5-star prediction for Pickpongathon, I read The Sinister Mystery of the Mesmerizing Girl by Theodora Goss, which is the last in the Athena Club series. And I also gave this 5 stars. I definitely preferred this over the second book, although I still feel that the first book is the strongest out of the trilogy. It was so nice being back in this world with these characters and seeing the character that I thought might play a part actually come to the forefront, which I very much enjoyed because I really loved them as a character. And I appreciated that it was very focused on the girls, and Sherlock wasn't as present in this one due to the situation, but it was so nice seeing the girls come into fruition on their own. And the dynamics were definitely tenuous at some points because not everyone's going to agree with every decision made, but they handle it in such a way that fills me with joy. And I really have adored my time reading this series. The plot gets bigger and bigger in this one. It was so much fun. I really just have a soft spot for characters. Can we tell I'm a character-driven reader? Next up, I read my big book pool for the month. That was Ink Death by Cornelia Funk, and I'm giving this 4 stars. I found that the characters in this were same as they were in the second book in the trilogy, which was very different from how they were in the first. I understand that there's a lot going on and they are in a situation where they can't remain naive, but it didn't feel as true to form as they had initially felt. It was very much like 180 and we're staying in that 180, but that 180 doesn't really make sense. I did like being back in this world and seeing how all of the characters were trying to figure out the situation. I definitely have a soft spot for Eleanor, as she is one of my favorites and just so entertaining. So it was a good time, and I think it's a solid conclusion to the trilogy. It just didn't happen to be my favorite. It still held that whimsical that I loved about the first one, but with the characters being so different, it was just hard to sympathize at some points because I was like, you're not the same person you were, and not in a way that felt authentic. The next book that I read was for Sufferathon, and that was Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shauna Maguire, which is the 3rd in the Wayward Children series. And I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoy this series, and these characters provide such a unique reading experience. It definitely took me by surprise for where we were going. I thought it was formatted slightly differently from how the first 2 had been, and that was fine. It just took me by surprise. The world was very interesting that we ended up going to, and I felt that we were progressing with more of the storyline to make sense. So I'm curious to see where the next one goes, because I thought that the structure of these books was slightly different than they actually are. So I'm very intrigued, and it has rekindled my desire to continue on with the series considering how short they are, and I just really adore Shauna Maguire's writing. This was just very tasty. For a middle grade that I had low expectations of, that I ended up swapping, was The Wisdom of Tea by Noriko Morishita. Damn it, my battery's dying. This was 5 stars. I absolutely adored this and totally was not expecting to. I'd been putting it off for the longest time just as it wasn't something I felt that I needed to read at that time, but holy fuck did I need to read it now. It is all about being intentional, and the messages that tea ceremony, or as it is in this, tea, can give to you when you're not even expecting it. And so in and of itself it was about that, but also providing that to me at the same time. It was a delight to read. I sobbed 3 times I think by page 18 because we had the introductory, and it hit me in a way that I was not emotionally prepared for, but I loved it. I think that if you're wanting to take a moment to be present and to think about life and being in the moment of right now, this is a beautiful book to help you do that. I definitely had a lot of thoughts that had been traveling around in my head sort of solidified and spoken out loud, and it was a really reaffirming and beautiful reading experience. So I don't think that everyone is going to have this same reaction with this book, but for me, I read it at the perfect time to get a lot out of it, and I can't wait to reread it throughout the years and continue to take more away from it. It surprised me with just how much I needed this in my soul. The next book that I read was for first in the series, and that was Hangman by Jack Heath. This is the first in the Timothy Blake series that is a guy helping out with missing people cases to gain a payment at the end of people that are on death row. I was hooked. This was so fascinating, and I loved the way that Timothy Blake, our protagonist, his brain works in this series. He's not a genius and he's not trying to be, but he is extremely observant, and because of that, the dynamics in it are just so interesting. I have since lent my copy to my mother, who messaged me last night being like, I did not see that ending coming, and same. It shook me to my core. I was not prepared. There were moments in this that I was completely so uncomfortable with what I was reading, but I loved it. It did what it meant to do, as uncomfortable as that made me feel. I wasn't sure if I wanted to give it 5 stars when I'd finished reading it, because I'm such an enjoyment-based reader and I didn't enjoy reading sections of this. It was very dark and descriptive, but it was so exceptionally done that I can't not give it 5 stars, because the book itself was amazingly written, it was engaging, and I couldn't put it down. So for that, it was definitely out of my comfort zone, but I'm so thankful that Crystal was like, please read this. And speaking of Crystal being like, please read this, I need to mark this off on my book, which I forgot to get earlier. God damn it, Paige, why must your brain be like this? So, bookish peeps. Hangman is right there. There we go. You would think I would be more strategic about what I read and do, but nope, not today. I was very surprised by Hangman, but very appreciative to Crystal for putting that in my hands. The next book that I read was another Sufferathon punishment, and that was Witch by Finbar Hawkins, and I gave this a 3.5. It was one of my lowest rated off my physical shelves, and I don't know how to describe where it was lacking, but it didn't feel like it did anything new. These covers are absolutely stunning, but the characters felt very two-dimensional. It was nice seeing female empowerment and gaining revenge, which is why I still kept going through, but we're in a time where women are very marginalized and persecuted for being witches, and then there was an element of women betraying other women that I felt was completely unnecessary, and it just didn't fill me with joy finishing it. I love a good witchy book, and I feel like this was just too young for me to fully appreciate it. I would rather read something like Once and Future Witches, which is dealing with similar sort of vibes. This just was okay, enjoyable while I'm reading it, but it's not very memorable and it just didn't do anything extra for me. But it also wasn't a bad book, and I can appreciate that young readers would get a lot out of this if this is their first sort of introduction, or they've read a few things similar but haven't delved into the adult witch suffragette movement and things like that. The characters just fell flat for me, and I have read more than this could offer, which is not the book's fault, it's mine. Then for Pickpongathon, I had Pet Pick, which I also used a swap for, and that was for The Dawn Chorus by Samantha Shannon. This is the bridging novella between the 3rd and the 4th book, so 3.5, and I gave this 4 stars. It was really interesting seeing Paige's recovery, and without going into too many details, I felt that it was well done to be a bridging book. It gives some context and fills in a few gaps from the previous novels, but I don't know if it would be necessary to read before diving into The Mask Falling. I'm about to find out in October, because I'm going to be reading The Mask Falling, and we'll be able to make a better decision on if you really do need the information that's provided, considering it is a big shift at the end of book 3. So I'm curious to see if this is still relevant. I love being with Paige and getting to see her grow, so I'm not mad to have read it, and it was so short. I enjoyed the flashback elements and getting that little bit extra content to the bone season, but I don't think it is a make or break at the moment. But I will get back to you in my October wrap up if you need to have read it. And then for least excited for, I read Serious Moonlight by Jen Bennett. I know that Crystal ended up DNFing this because it was just too YA, but I was in a place where I was happy just trying to read this out and about and move around, and I was doing things for the last 50%. So whilst it was extremely young. Crystal said she felt that she was reading from the perspective of 13-year-olds, not 18-year-olds. I sort of put it down to her sheltered life. She's been homeschooled, she's been kept in a bubble by her grandmother, and this is her first exploration into being an adult in the wider world. Whilst that initial part for me was very, yeah, okay, how the fuck is someone this sheltered? I sort of gave it that little bit of grace, and I ended up giving it a 4 stars. The mental health rep for me was really, there was moments of being sucker punched, and I really appreciate that it was in there. There was one scene with some gummies that filled me with joy, because I would be Birdie in that situation. I would not know which way was up, and it was glorious and very relatable. I also really enjoyed the setting of Seattle, because there were a lot of things and a lot of places that they went that I went to when I visited as well. It cropped up a lot of memories for me, and I just really appreciated it because it was something that got my nostalgia feelings going. So instead of seeing it as young, I was just thinking of my past, and it became like this little wholesome thing. I don't think this is going to be for every adult, and I definitely think if you are an adult, it reads young. If you're not a big fan or phasing out of YA contemporary, this is YA contemporary. If you've got younger people in your life that are coming into themselves and wanting to see life more, I think that this wouldn't be bad for them. The mystery elements of it was very weird, and the way that it concluded, I was like, really? We're back in the YA sphere. But it was a good, fun time. But fully understand, this is not going to be every adult's cup of tea. Then for my punishment for week 3, I had to read 5 graphic novels or manga in one sitting. And so I chose to go with Giant Days by John Ellison, volumes 3 to 7. And I went live and just read these in their entirety. And because of that fact, I cannot separate each individual volume at all. I know the first one because I want Ash to read this, because there is things that happen in this that I would very much like him to witness, and it was a really sweet character development moment. But the rest of these, I could not tell you what happens in each individual one. But I did give them all 5 stars. I adore our trio. They are so funny, and just watching their college experience, it was delightful. I know that my own college experience wasn't the same. I wasn't living in dorms. I didn't need to find my own accommodation, but there were so many little aspects of it that I was like, ah yes, that's a thing. That is a college experience. And I just have so much fun with them. I love the dynamics between them, and oh, the relationship in it. Oh, it hurts. There's one particular relationship that develops, and it makes me laugh just thinking back on my own relationships at some points as well. Both my actions and others. And it's just funny. It's just a good time. I love this series, and I'm now halfway through. I have still more to catch up on, but we made a dent. Thank you, Ren, for breaking me in that regard. Amy made me cry with her punishment, so. Then for different culture, I can't find my little Pickpong card for it, but I read Babel by R.F. Kuang and gave this 4 stars. The way that I'm going to talk about this, I apologize, it is not coherent. This was such a slow moving book. I felt that I was reading this for days, and I'm not sure what happened. I'll leave links to my Sufferathon vlogs that will have more thoughts on most of these. I don't think I actually ended up talking about which in the vlogs, but anyway, I'm giving this 4 stars because of the conversations that I know I'm going to have because of it. I think that it is an amazing conversation piece. It was well written and a good narrative, but holy fuck, I didn't like a single one of the characters, and the magic system was incorporated in a way that I just felt was irrelevant. I get it. I get that that was the purpose of why they were at Babel, but it didn't do anything. I got it. I understood why, but it was like, it made the magic system completely redundant. It wasn't delved into, which I was hoping that it would be. It is definitely literary fantasy, with literary being the primary focus, and the conversations on colonialism were fantastic. I did sympathize for the characters in what they were going through, but they were just so I think when looking at it in comparison to Dark Academia's Secret History commentary, does it exceptionally well. The friend elitist group from Secret History were fucking dick shits. But this group, it didn't make sense to me why these people were all banding together, aside from the fact that they were marginalized. It didn't feel authentic, but it was like, I'd ride and die for you, but I won't. But I would, but I won't. The friendships didn't feel authentic, and I know that a lot of them were dealing with their own shit, that they all had their own baggage, but after the main turning point of this, which still felt like a hard pass to get through, they were like, yeah, we're tight, like we've got your back in this, but they never actually felt like they did. And I think that was the biggest hiccup for me. I suppose it was supposed to be more focusing on Robin and their bringing down of the Empire. It was just interesting. It was a very interesting experience. I still don't have my thoughts coherently in place about it, but Ash and I did have a lot of conversations after I'd finished reading it, because he's also read it. Personally, I think if we had have gone more into how the silversmithing works to show its importance, like you got told that it was important, you could see how it was used in the world to know that it was important, but there wasn't really anything that was like, wow, until the ending. And it's like, well, great. I definitely am glad that I've read this so I can continue to articulate my thoughts and continue to watch reviews and get a better understanding for why I'm feeling the way that I am. And it is a great book. It is well written. The pacing and the characters were just off, which surprised me for R.F. Kuang, because I feel that Rin from the Poppy War is so strong. I don't know, it missed the mark. And I'm not sure why, but I'm going to endeavour to figure out why. Then for my last Pickpong book, I needed to read fave genre and fantasy, so I went with Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo and gave this a 4.5. I adored these characters so much. I didn't really give a shit about the heist. I just appreciated seeing their little dynamics and the way that they all interacted with one another, and these characters make this book. I very much feel for them and the shit that they've been through, and I loved being back in the Grishiverse. I don't think that you do need to read the Shadow and Bone series before diving into this, but there are nods to it, which I appreciated having knowing. So if you like being able to pick up on those little Easter eggs, you can read this and then read Shadow and Bone, and you'll be able to pick those connections, but you don't have to have read Shadow and Bone to be able to dive into this. But I'm glad that that's the way I chose to do it, just because I like having those little nods and knowing about them and being like, oh, yes! I think because I'm now back in this world, I'm so excited to dive into Crooked Kingdom and see where we end up with these characters. I want to know. I want to see and just be back with these for longer, because they have just stolen every fibre of my being, and that's great. I wouldn't say that this is the best written book that I've ever read. Babel is definitely better written, but in terms of the enjoyment factor, where a lot of my reading comes from, I had so much fun reading this. It was absolutely delightful, even though it was really dark and harrowing at some points. It was great. And I loved getting to see the backstory to these characters as well. Six of Crows was also put into my hands by Liv from Endless Pages for my bookish advent challenge. So we need to do another sticker. Go. Woohoo! I've got the 4 across there. I just need to make a Korean inspired meal. Before I dive into the last book, I'll also just let you know that I am ticking off another thing on this, which is from Bookish Gems, which is do something you've said you wanted to do for the past few years but haven't done. And for that, I have started a bullet journal. I've done it for 2 weeks in September and obviously now into October, and I'm really enjoying it. It's hitting the organization freedom that I needed, and I don't have to feel bad if I miss a day or skip sections, because it's not pre-planned, there's no date set, so it's all good. So I'm gonna mark off that activity up the top. So there we go. So I just need to read Master of Jinn and we're there. So that is that. On to the final book. I ended up getting another, I had punishments throughout the month because I just took them. Why not? And for that, I put a book that doesn't have an audiobook to be able to listen along with. So what better time to read an arc? And I read Hunt on Dark Waters by Katie Robert, and 5 stars. Just I haven't decided where I would sit this in terms of starting with Katie. I don't know if I would recommend starting with this because it is easy to fall into this world. It's very much her style of writing, but the sex scenes definitely lean more towards Dragon's Bride than Neon Gods, and whilst that's not a bad thing, I definitely think it's more of a surprising thing. The story for this is very cute. I actually did write a review for Goodreads, so I can reference that. Obviously, Katie Robert characters are my life. Having Evelyn be a chaotic bisexual witch was like everything I needed, and it was fantastic for that. There's also diverse secondary characters, so the use of neo-pronouns were easily incorporated because they were not human, so they went by Z and Zia. Their dynamic is very entertaining because Evelyn is so snarky and sneaky, whereas Bowen's a golden retriever cinnamon roll, and I love a golden retriever cinnamon roll protagonist, and he's just so cute and so fucking loyal. And she is just a chaotic demon, and it's great. Very similar to Ash and I. It definitely leans more to insta-love rather than the development of their romance, but seeing them get to develop their relationship throughout the book was nice. But if you can't deal with insta-love, it is definitely more on the insta-lovey side of things. And the magic in this was fun. I loved Evelyn's tattoos and the telekinetic powers and the way that they're used, but things are unexplained. And I don't feel like Katie usually does. It is just, this is the magic that is here and we're going with it. The magical creatures and mythology woven in were always done in a fun way. In terms of the spice, definitely took me by surprise for some moments, and I'm not mad at it. It's just something I wasn't expecting. I think the spicy scenes were ones that I'm mentally struggling with because it didn't contain two elements that I adore, which is aftercare and the consent discussion. Everyone is consenting and none of it is non-consensual, but there wasn't that discussion, which I've come to know from their books. And with this being mainstream, I was like, damn it, I'd love to have seen it. But I also understand why aftercare wasn't included because it wasn't feasible, and that's fine. It's just something that I've come to know and love in Katie Roberts. But with that, some of the spicy scenes hit a point of unrealistic, and given what they've written previously, I am surprised that I feel that way, because we are in a magical world. These things shouldn't be unrealistic, but it went too hard and couldn't come back from it. I know that she is magical, so she probably has healing vibes that she was just doing, but there wasn't any conversation about it, so it was like, wait, what? I think that was a surprise for me as someone that has read her Monster Smart and her more humanoid sex scenes, to be so caught off guard with that. But guys, still love every single bit of it, and it's not lowering my rating. It was just a moment of, oh, okay, take of that information what you will. But I'm so happy to have this in my hands. I loved it so much. Basically, can we tell I'm just fangirling over Evelyn because she's amazing. She's also me. So this plus Hangman, which I've lent to my mum, and 3 digital books were the stack of things that I read in September. And holy fuck, that is a stack. Let me know in the comments how you got along in September. Were you participating in any readathons? Did you find a new favorite book? If so, what was it? And what else did you get up to? If you want to let me know, down below. And if you like this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of this mess, feel free to subscribe. I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!